Let's get to Manchester United first, though. Ruben Amorim said his side did not exist in the first half. They came from 2-0 down to draw 2-2 against Everton at Goodison Park. Late drama too. Everton denied a late penalty overturned following an intervention from VAR. So we will start at the end then, Sam. Penalty or not?
Not
mess about.
Yeah, I thought it was a penalty, but I could see arguing both ways. I certainly didn't think it was a clear and obvious error, so I was really surprised that it was overturned. And I think also, I think this has been discussed, but they didn't seem to show the referee all the angles, and perhaps the most incriminating angle. And maybe they shouldn't pick angles based on what's most incriminating, but it felt like the angles that the referee did see on the monitor weren't the ones that showed what happened the clearest. So for me, it is a penalty. There's a clear shirt pull, if not two clear shirt pulls. And I think Ashley Young's got a chance of getting that ball if he's not pulled back. What I would say, though, is I don't think Young helps himself with the way he goes down. It's very dramatic. If you see his legs kind of fly out behind him, you can see how somebody might look at that and think he's gone down kind of more excessively or more dramatically than he needed to. So maybe that's played part into it. But yeah, I was surprised that was overturned for sure.
I think the point is, and it's certainly a point that David Moores was making yesterday, is about this high bar that is supposed to be in place this season, that it needs to be, or in theory needs to be, an absolute clanger for it to be overturned, or there to be a suggestion to go and have a look at it on the monitor. And yeah, it's very subjective. I was at Craven Cottage yesterday watching it in the press room, and it was probably a 50-50 call. So if that's the case, if the referee's made the decision on field, you should probably stick with it, shouldn't you?
Yes, you should. I mean, we use all of these phrases, again, as we were saying in the first part, referee's call, high bar, clear and obvious. The only thing that was clear and obvious yesterday was that his shirt was pulled. Now, I take the point about the theatricality of, going down in instalments, but that's neither here nor there. If the defender transgresses, that is a penalty. That is a penalty. And I can see why Ashley is in the referee's face there, because I don't think the referee's being guided correctly. So many things about the way the referees are making decisions right now concern me, not least the fact that we are told time and again that we don't want to re-referee the game, and all about the concept of referee's call, and yet the referee hasn't made that decision. And if he has been helped, but in inverted commas, by the VAR, why doesn't the VAR show him the one angle that would have vindicated what the referee's instinct had been in the first place?
And I think the other frustration is that it appears to be so formulaic that the moment a referee is sent to the screen, everyone knows it's going to be overturned, and there isn't seemingly a presence of mind from the on-field official to think, do you know what, I'm going to stick with what I just did 2 minutes ago and ignore the VAR, with the greatest of respect, because that's still a subjective decision, but I still think, to my mind, that's a penalty.
I mean, it almost feels as though if the VAR calls the referee to the screen, the VAR is going to show the angles that vindicate what he thinks, as opposed to what the referee might think. If a referee makes a decision, you would imagine the VAR would find every conceivable angle to support what the man in the middle has decided. But that doesn't appear to be the case.
Darren said there was a couple of things that were clear and obvious yesterday. One thing is that the man behind him, Bruno Fernandes, without him, Manchester United would be in a bit of a pickle, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I'm a little bit torn on the Bruno Fernandes. I know that sounds odd, given that he's obviously their best player and he scores all their goals and creates all their goals. But I mean,
other than that, he's rubbish, Sam, isn't he? Yeah, great.
No, he's certainly not rubbish. He's a long way from being rubbish. It's just, I think, and I thought this for quite a few years now, so this sort of dates back pre-Amorim, but he's the kind of player who always tries to make things happen, and that's great, and that's why he gets so many goals and assists. But also, he's quite loose. He gives the ball away a lot. I think yesterday, for example, in the build up to the second Everton goal, it was him beaten quite easily on the pressing, just he wasn't particularly alert to it or strong with it. And I think there are certain things that he does that don't help the structure of the team that much. And I think the fact that United have built around Bruno Fernandes for quite a few years and haven't been particularly good as a team for quite a few years, I'm not sure that's entirely irrelevant. I'm not sure those two facts are totally disconnected. And someone asked me earlier, would Bruno Fernandes get into every other team in the Premier League? And I don't think he would. I think a lot of managers at the top of the table would be looking for a midfielder with more control, more patience, more sort of game management.
So he wouldn't get Liverpool's best team?
I don't think he would.
Arsenal?
I don't think he would. And I'm probably going to come off this and have loads of tweets of people aiming stuff at me, because obviously he's a fabulous player and I should make that clear. And you see his technical skill, the way he scores goals, the things he creates, fantastic. But I think there are a lot of less eye-catching things that he doesn't do quite so well. And I do worry, for United's sake, that he might not be the long-term answer for that reason.
Do you think he would?
What, Liverpool's?
Yeah.
I think there's an argument that he could play in that 10 position, but I think the amount of work that Dominic Szoboszlai does off the ball in terms of the pressing and being the guy who sort of leads the press a little bit, I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Arsenal?
It's turned into a grilling down. I'm not sure I like this. I quite like asking the questions, not answering them. Arsenal, does he? Again, if you play Martin Ødegaard in that position, it's tight, isn't it? You could play with just Declan Rice and then both Ødegaard and Bruno Fernandes ahead of that if you wanted to. You? I'm going to get away from this. I'm really uncomfortable with the whole thing.
I think, as far as Liverpool are concerned, the temperament of the Liverpool players, for me, suggests that he wouldn't get into that side, because Jonathan Northcroft earlier in the season did a terrific piece in the Sunday Times where he talked about the number of yellow cards that Bruno picks up just before half-time, when he's remonstrating with referees over decisions that have been made when the team's backs are against the wall. And I think that you see how much emotion is taken out of much of Liverpool's game. And for me, I think that's the reason why they go with the likes of Szoboszlai, why they go with many of the players they have. A lot of the leadership in the Liverpool side, yes, everyone can pick out an example of when a player has shown up extremes of emotion, but I think generally when you look at Van Dijk, the leadership kind of sets that tone. And I think as far as Manchester United are concerned, maybe it's not there. That said, I do think that Fernandes really has done well so far this season. He scored the most goals, 6 goals so far this season, jointly with Ahmad. There's a bit of a drop-off to the rest of them. He and Ahmed both have provided 6 assists in the Premier League. Again, big drop-off behind them to all the rest who have got 1. And his quotes on to Manchester United's in-house TV station, where he says last night, at half-time when we came in, I had to look at my own performance first. I had to set a standard, and he came out with the intent of doing that in the second half. And that's why he pretty much ran the show. So I don't want to sit here traducing him at all. He's a terrific player, and he is showing that with the backs, the collective backs of Manchester United, very much against the wall.
I guess the wider question then, aside from Bruno Fernandes, is are you seeing any signs of life and improvement and progress under Ruben Amorim?
Not yet. It's been quite a while now and still no. It's amazing how, even from the day he arrived, how insistent he was that this was the system and that's what's going to happen, irrespective of the tools at his disposal or the players he has. And it's just not worked so far. And I fear for United that if there's no sort of sense of positive progress, or even just a few decent performances over the next few months before this season ends, because they're not going to go down, but if there's no if they don't go into that summer with some belief that this core group of players can play this system, then where does it go from there? If the players aren't buying into it, I mean, you look at them yesterday in the first half, and they don't seem to know what they should be doing and when. And this is the only system he's ever going to play, and that feels like long term. If they need to have something to believe in and buy into, and have they got that right now?
I think that's a really important question, because, and it's a question that is kind of growing within the journalistic fraternity, and I'm sure within the ex-player punditry fraternity as well, because great managers have different ways to play. They can adapt, particularly to events. And with the club falling like a stone down the Premier League, you cannot possibly continue to say, I'm going to stick to my principles. If you look at these headlines up here, they were rescued yesterday by that VAR decision, because had it not been for that decision, they'd have lost. They were rank, as you can see in the middle caption. I look at the subdeck on this one over here, underneath looted. They were lucky to steal a point. And it is not by design that they are managing to keep their heads above water. I look at the way that they play at the moment. I'm sure you do, our colleagues do as well, and we all are of the opinion that it's been a disappointment under Amorim. And when he arrived, and he was so charismatic and engaging, he's a superb communicator. He'd done brilliantly with Sporting. We thought this is the guy to get this group of players into shape, well organised, confident, and it's just been chaotic so far. And I cannot tell you where their next points are going to come from. Now, you can't just blame him. The situation at the club is toxic, and I think it is much more complex than saying, is he the right man? The leadership at the club, right from the Glazers downward, is absolutely shambolic, with their £1 billion debt and the calibre of players that they're bringing in, and the forcing onto the shoulders of young players responsibility. You saw Varane's quotes in midfield, terrific interview with The Athletic, where he said, look, when I was at Real Madrid, if you were 18, 19 years of age, you go in the dressing room and you learned, you watched, you didn't play any football, you learned about the culture, and the senior players carried you. At Manchester United, they are loading it all onto the teenagers, and that's a big part of why they are where they are right now.
And a lot of it is interlinked, isn't it? That a lot of what Darren was talking about there, about things that are going on above Ruben Amorim, eventually bleed their way through to what the manager's got to work with. So you can talk about the system, but one of the points about the system is no matter if they're playing 3-4-3, 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, if the players aren't good enough, it doesn't matter what you play. He's then talking last week about the money isn't there for a rebuild. So he might get to May and think, these players can't do what I want in a 3-4-3, but what's he going to do about it?
Exactly. So in that situation, hiring a manager who's insistent on 3-4-3 without a squad that is capable of playing 3-4-3 and having no financial means to turn that squad around feels like a bad decision, basically, when you put it that way. So either they've got the right man and the wrong squad, or the right squad and the wrong man, because those two things don't seem to be aligned in any way right now. Of course, it could change. These players could develop, they could be coached, they can get better, they can learn the system, and I think that is effectively United's best hope now, that the players they've got, and that they can make a few sales in the summer, get a few players in, and it doesn't
Do you
always
end up then having to sell your best players to generate the money? Because they're also talking about PSR a little bit, that you might have to bite the bullet with a Fernandes or a Mainu,
Garnacho.
Yeah, to try and regenerate the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it requires tough decisions. They've made so many bad decisions over so many years that it now requires really difficult ones, and it's going to be ones that the fans don't really like. But that's what they're going to have to do if they're going to turn this around. And I do think it doesn't necessarily take 11 new players to turn this into something functional. It might be just one or two who really know the system. And for example, someone like Ugarte, you would have thought, given that he played with Amorim before, that he'd be the perfect man for this system. Maybe a couple more like him, and it just suddenly clicks a bit more. But I don't. You can't watch them right now and feel hugely optimistic for their future, to be honest.
Papers?
Yeah, Sam Wallace sums it up as ever, succinctly and superbly. Talks all about the fact that it was the one-man show of Bruno Fernandes to keep Manchester United's collective head above water. And he asked where they would be without him. And it's a really legitimate question, because there are so few other consistent performers apart from Fernandes. And for all we might say, and the debates and whatnot, for Manchester United, he is absolutely crucial. I want to spin very quickly on to the next one as well, because I think there is a bigger picture which is very concerning in the Sunday Mirror. And what the Mirror have done is given two stories equal importance, because the Premier League footballing future of Manchester United is of grave concern. We've spoken about it a second ago, and we know all about the VAR decision. I want to point you to this story in the bottom right hand corner as well. Booted, picture of Sir Jim Ratcliffe. Look at the subdeck, another 200 job cuts as staff bracing themselves for that savage, says Simon, round of redundancies. And he says that employers have been summoned for a meeting that will take place tomorrow. They're expecting to be told that more jobs are going to be slashed from the payroll. And that's so much more serious than everything that goes on the pitch. The morale at the club is toxic. The soul is being stripped away from Manchester United. And we know that they're a club where the players value the staff as much as the staff value the players. We know that they're a club where there is a real collective will to succeed, and we've heard it so many times, you know, not just on the pitch, not just from the captain or the manager, but right down to the tea lady, right down to the receptionist. We saw one beloved member of staff. We saw the turnout for her funeral after her passing very recently. These are people who are valued by the players and by extension by the fan base, and they're being stripped away. And Simon's piece it's a very extensive piece, and it's well worth a read as well, because he talks about the fact that the club would appear, and you know, we'll hear from the club eventually, I'm sure, so I don't want to make any presumptions on their behalf, but he talks about the fact that they appear to be moving away from all the things that made Manchester United a superpower in this country and across.